our Praxis early education webinar, 5025 and 5024. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, all over the place. And so if you are joining me in Vimeo, meaning you signed up for the webinar, come on in and let me know in the chat that you can hear me and see me. It looks like everything is working, but let me know if you can hear me and see me. So today we are working on early childhood, 5025 and 5024. Okay, these are the two books that I have for this exam. I also have online courses and everything. But today we're going to go over some free stuff. If you joined the webinar, when you signed up, you got 2 free study guides. There's one for 5024 and one for 5025. And you got the link to join the actual webinar. So some of you are watching on Facebook and YouTube. Let me just make sure I am live in both places. And I am good. But if you are joining me inside the webinar, you actually signed up and you received 2 free study guides, one for 5025 and one for 5024. I recommend downloading them both and looking at them regardless of which test you're taking, because they will both help you. And then if you're watching me online, Facebook, YouTube, wherever I am right now, LinkedIn, you can click, there's a link in the description that says to get the resources for this webinar, click here, do that, sign up. When you do, you'll be taken to a thank you page. On that thank you page are the free study guides and everything. If you're watching in the future, the link is in the description also. And if you signed up, all that should be sent to your email. When we are done with this webinar today, you're going to get everything that we talked about. So you're going to get the free study guides. Again, you'll get the constructed response, because we are going to do a constructed response for the 5024 people. But if you're a 5025 person, I recommend staying for the constructed response because it will help you with your multiple choice. You don't have a writing portion, but stay anyway. I'll talk more about that in a second. And you'll get any resources we talk about. Okay. So really quickly, my name is Kathleen Jasper. I own Kathleen Jasper LLC. I have been helping prospective teachers and assistant principals and principals pass their certification exams and get the jobs they want in education. I started off as a substitute teacher, like many of you. And I got a permanent substitute position at a high school because somebody left in the middle of the year. I couldn't understand why someone would leave in the middle of the year when they retired. Now that I've been in education enough, I can see why. Once he was done, he was done. So he left in December, or right at the semester break. I started second semester. It was tough. I talk about it a lot in my book, Teach, a Survival Guide for New Educators, about my experience switching from being a sub to a real teacher. It was quite a jump. And I got certified like many of you. I started taking the certification courses. I had to take some extra courses because my bachelor's was in something else besides teaching. And then I loved it, became a teacher, then worked in curriculum at the downtown office. Those of you who know me or know my story, you know that I loved that job, working in curriculum downtown. If you ever have a chance to work in professional development or curriculum, I highly recommend. You learn so much. And a lot of what I do today is based on what I learned then for testing, because the testing companies came in and trained us on how to write good test questions and things like that. So I use a lot of that information now. And then when I left the curriculum office, I went back to the high school and I became an assistant principal, and I did that for 3 years. So I've hired teachers, I've interviewed teachers, I've been a teacher, I've taken the test, I've helped people prepare for the test, sort of been all the things in education. And now I help people with their careers in education. And I love, love, love it, because now I'm back to teaching. And I love teaching. I'm also working on some new courses for SAT, ACT, GED. I want to get back to helping high school kids. So those of you with high school students who are taking these exams, I will soon have a place for them to land and grab that. We're almost done with our very first SAT course. So just a little bit of that. When you came in here, you got our free study guides, but we do have paid study guides. I'll show you where to get those. These are much more comprehensive than the free, obviously. But many people use our free stuff, piece it all together, and pass the exam. So if you're trying to save money and you don't want to buy a bunch of stuff, our free stuff is awesome. I have a YouTube channel, Facebook page, TikTok, free study guides, webinars, good words, strategies, all of that. And you can piece together your own program and save some money. And I'm totally fine with that. I love our free stuff. That's why I do this every Saturday. All right. So it looks like we have people from all over. Let me know in the chat if you're taking the 5025 or the 5024. I'm going to go over both today. But I can see we've got Marianne, Tawana. I've got somebody else with a weird name. I think it's probably just initials. Sorry. It's Rajylaxmi. Kate, Anna, Kathleen Perez. Hello, Kathleen. That's my first name too. Letty. So everybody, welcome. There is somebody in my chat. Her name is Yana Crystal Bossy. She is my colleague, and she will be answering any questions that I can't get to because I'll be working on the stuff. So while I will look at the chat and answer some questions, I will also have her answer some questions too. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you are taking the 5025. Any 5024 people out there? Let me know. Okay, so we're going to go over both. Both tests are different from each other. The 5025 has a lot of content. This is going to be stuff like you have to know stuff about social studies and science that you may not have thought about, like invertebrates versus vertebrates and open circulatory system versus closed circulatory system. Now, that may seem like something easy to some people, but if you have been an accountant for the last 15 years and now you're deciding to become a teacher, you might not have thought about open circulatory system versus closed circulatory system in a really long time, right? So I'm going to go over all of that in here. I'm going to talk to you about it, but I have all that information here. The 5025 has language arts and reading, which is probably the biggest and most important one because above all, you are a reading teacher, especially at this age. Then it has mathematics, social studies, science, and then it has the specials basically lumped together, fine arts, PE, and health. So those are all lumped together into one. The 5024, and there is no constructed response, no writing, all multiple choice for the 5025. I'm going to go over the blueprint in a minute. The 5024 is different. The 5024 focuses mainly on developmental stages of students at this age, because when you're teaching these kids, there is such a range of ability when we're talking about this. You have kids in kindergarten who can't write their name, all the way up to kids who are like reading in kindergarten. It's a range because everybody sort of comes in with different skill levels. It doesn't mean that any one student is smarter than the other or better than the other. It's just that there's such a range. And that's why my heart goes out to people who teach this grade level, because it's hard. I taught high school. I would take high school any day over the little ones, because the little ones, I think, just from my experience, are very challenging. So those of you going into this field, this age, I commend you. I've always been in awe of kindergarten teachers, pre-K teachers. I don't know how you do it, and I admire you big time. So we're going to go over both of these today. Looks like most of you are taking the 5024, or 5025, but we do have lots of people taking the 5024. I also have people that have to take both, which seems very ridiculous to me. I don't like to give my opinion too much because I will go off, because I have a lot of opinions about education, but I just don't see why they would make you take both. But those of you who have to, that's fine. We have programs for both. 5024, I've not passed it twice, just found you and your book. Awesome, Diane. Okay, so a lot of you, let's talk about not passing the test more than once. First of all, many people have to take Praxis exams more than once. This exam only has a 50% pass rate for those who take it the first time. Okay. So if you have to take this again, I know it's a bummer and no one likes failing an exam, but it's just sort of what happens to a lot of people. It's very nuanced. And if you have not taught before, there are some questions you might think you're answering correctly, but you're not answering correctly. And that's where my work backwards and kind of zero in on the answer choices and eliminate bad words and zero in on good words is going to help you. And I'm going to show you that. We're going to think like a test maker. I always say that. Think like a test maker, not a test taker. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that when you're analyzing an item. How do I know about this? Well, I was trained by the test makers. I know the patterns. I study the blueprints. I look over the test specifications. And so I know the patterns on the exams, and I'm not special. You will know them too when you look at the exam in a way that's different than a test taker. You want to look at it like you are a test developer, and I'm going to show you how that, okay? All right. So a lot of you are in your second, third, some of you in your fourth time, some of you missed by 6 points. It's all good. You're going to get it. Just don't give up. We're going to talk about it. All right. So first of all, let's talk about the difference between the two tests. Now, I'm going to do this by showing you my table of contents in my books. because they're laid out in this way. This is the 5025 book. Okay, so this is the green book. So as you can see, we have language and literacy. And you can see these are all the little sub areas underneath. So under language and literacy, you're going to have emergent literacy. That's going to be your phonemic awareness, your phonological awareness, your phonics. This is going to have everything to do with teaching students sounds in words, alphabetic principle, all of that stuff. And that's all in this study guide and my online course. One of the most important things that you got to do is you have to read about this. You can't just take practice tests over and over again. If you're doing that, you won't pass because you don't know what test you're going to get, and you shouldn't know what test you're going to get. Just like your students don't know what state test they're going to get at the end of the year, you shouldn't know what you're going to get. You might get some of the same questions like the second time you take it or the third time you take it. You might even get the same exact form of the test, but there are hundreds of items in item banks for this exam. I wouldn't try to memorize test questions. Instead, what you need to do is really understand this information. Okay. And we're going to go over a lot of it today, but there's a lot. Now I have if you're looking for something free, now this is obviously my paid study guide. This is 210 pages. I'm going to show you a few things in here, but if you're looking for something free on my YouTube channel, I have a teaching reading playlist that you should definitely watch. Now I cover it all in our online course, of course, and all of that. But if you want something free, you can go to the YouTube channel. I'll show you where to get all this in just a second. So that's all language and literacy. So how we teach students how to read. And you can see that, let me go here. Yeah. You can see that, one second. Let me go to there we go. There we go. Now I can switch back and forth. You can see that language and literacy is the biggest part here at 30%. Okay. So that's the biggest part of the exam because it's the state's position that you are a reading teacher above everything else. Okay. Then we have mathematics for the 5025. That's going to be at 25%. Then social studies 14, science 14, and then health, physical education, creative and performing arts 17%. And like I said before, the 5025 is going to be mainly concerned with the subjects you are going to be teaching. There are going to be teaching strategies built in, meaning like, how would you approach this with a kindergarten class? How would you do this with a pre-K student? Or what sort of interventions would you do, right? But it's going to be focused on content. Now, for the 5024, let's just zoom in here. That's a little bit different. Notice that in their content categories, you don't have any specific math, science, social studies. Instead, it's focused mainly on the development of young learners. We have childhood development and learning, observation, documentation, and assessment, huge on the in any classroom. Assessment is huge. Developmentally appropriate practices, also called DAP. Be on the lookout for that. Professionalism, family, and community. Working with parents and things like that. Then in content category 5, this is where you will have specific questions on science, social studies, math, and language arts. So basically all of this information in the 5025, they've sort of slipped in here in the 5024. It's not as much, but it's there. And then of course you have let me just go out a little bit. You have your constructed response. You're going to have 3 of them. 3 essays. And those are going to come from these sections here. So here's something that I need you to understand when you're taking a test that has a constructed response. You learn all this information for the multiple choice. And then when you go to take the constructed response, you forget everything you read in the book. Use the stuff that we talked about in the book. Use the good words, and I'm going to talk about the good words today, that we find in the correct answer choices and throw them into your written response. That way, you're showing your content knowledge. That's what they want to know, that you're applying your content knowledge to scenarios they're giving you for the writing portion of the exam. So I'm going to show you how to do that, but don't just throw away. And I know it's obvious to me because all I do is study exams. But if you're taking an exam, you're like getting through the multiple choice and you're going, oh, that's over with. And then you go to the constructed response and it's almost like you're using two different skill sets. I don't recommend you do that. This is one whole skill set here. Everything you learned about in childhood development can be applied to pretty much any constructed response for this test. You can apply some of these things that you really understood in the study guide. You can apply them in any writing. You can find a way to weave in what you're good at in the writing. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. So please hold on to the information that you learned in the study guides and apply that to obviously the multiple choice for sure, but then take that information from the multiple choice and use it in your constructed response. Now, the last thing I'm going to say before we actually get into the questions, please read the study guide. People buy the study guide and the first thing they do is just go to the end and do the practice tests. And then they just go, okay, I finished the study guide. You didn't finish the study guide. Elementary education and early childhood education is so nuanced with what you need to understand, especially if you're a career changer. You're going to answer questions like you were when you were a student, right? Things like, just things that we used to do, right? Round robin reading. That used to be something we did. I came up in the 80s, right? What did we do? Round robin reading. You read, then you read, then you read up and down the rows, right? And we all freaked out because we were coming up next and the kid's reading and it's my turn next. I'm like, oh my God, I do not want to read aloud, but everybody has to. And it's like, if you don't do it, you're in trouble and all that stuff. I mean, that's how we grew up. Well, guess what? It's not good practice. Shocker. That's not a good practice, right? Instead, there are read aloud, think aloud strategies where students feel safe enough to read aloud. We don't make students read out loud if they don't want to, because it turns out that doesn't make them good readers. Forcing someone to read aloud who doesn't like to read aloud is not going to help them feel confident about their reading. But because it's something we grew up with, when you go to answer questions, you might answer in that way. Also, I've noticed too, people who are from the military have a hard time, probably with this exam, but also with like the principles of learning and teaching. I'm doing a webinar on that in a couple of weeks. It's all about restorative justice in our schools. And I know people are going to be like, restorative justice. Oh, everybody's a snowflake and all this stuff. No, it's actually because restorative justice works better than punitive measures. If punitive measures worked, then all these prison sentences would mean there would be no crime. And we know that that's not true. All these kids we send to ISS, that would mean, or OSS, or sent them home or whatever, that would mean there would be no more issues in the school. Well, those of you in the school know it doesn't matter how many times you send them to ISS. It doesn't matter how many times you call home. It doesn't matter how many times whatever. It doesn't work. It's all about restorative justice, taking interest in the students, praising them for their good deeds of the day, doing all of that over and over again until you start to change the behavior. But if you're from the military, or if you grew up Gen X like I did, punitive measures were like the thing, right? I mean, up until third grade, we got paddled. I remember it stopped when I was in third grade. I never got paddled, thank God, but there was a paddle in the principal's office. And that was totally just normal stuff. Someone else just beating us with a paddle. That is kind of what we were used to. Obviously, you're not going to choose the paddling on a test like this, but I'm just saying some of these old practices can seep into your mind where you think you're answering them correctly, but you're not. So that's why it's so important to actually read these study guides, watch the videos I put on YouTube. Some of them are long. You can watch them in 2-speed, but I promise you, I'm kind of explaining the concepts so you understand what's going on here. And yes, punitive measures, if punitive measures worked, we wouldn't have any crime. We have imprisoned so many people in the United States. And, I don't know. We've taken away 1 million cell phones. There's still cell phones, So I'm just saying the restorative justice does work. The data shows it. But when you answer questions, for sure, you may not agree with it, but when you're answering questions on this test, I highly recommend you abandon any sort of punitive mindset and go into the loving mindset. These are small kids. They need love, not hard truths yet. So let's try to answer those questions with restorative justice. And I also recommend you use that in your classroom, which I'm sure many of you are. If you're teaching these kids, my hat goes off to you. I'm so glad you're doing that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's go through some of the questions. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. When you are working through these questions, I want you to work backwards. Now, let me know in the chat if you're someone who knows about my work backwards method and if you've tried it. Those of you who are new, and I know some of you just found us, and I'm so glad you're here. This is another way I teach people how to think like a test maker. In some of these longer scenario questions where people think, oh my God, all 4 of these answer choices look good. And I'm sure you have gone through the test and gone, oh my God, which one is it? These all look like good answer choices. This work backwards method is going to help you. You're going to cross off bad words and zero in on good words. So, and Kelsey says, yes, pass the 5001 and the 5205 using that method. Those are awesome tests to use this with. So sometimes you can't use it because if it's a 1-word answer choice, you can't really work backwards. But the big long scenarios where it's got, oh, the child does blah, 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 and it's like a page long worth of stuff, it's going to help you a lot. You can at least narrow it down to 50-50 and zero in, okay? So when I talk about good words, I'm talking about words that are in the test specifications. All right, so let me talk about that. Test specs are published by the test maker. And I used to project them in my webinars, but I later learned from my attorneys that that is proprietary information. And I don't want to be using other people's work in my webinars, but you can certainly go and Google it. If you're taking the Praxis, you just do Praxis 5025 Study Companion. Praxis 5024 Study Companion. We'll link them up in the email that goes out today so you can click on the link and go. I just don't want to be using their information here. On it, you'll see a blueprint, a lot like I just showed you when I talked about the content categories on the exam. And then if you scroll down a little bit further on page like 5 or 6, you'll see it'll say test specifications or content specifications. Specification means specific things that are on the test. They lay it all out for you. And in that information are these good words, things like explicit instruction. What's explicit instruction? That's where we're focusing on these skills explicitly. We're not just lumping everything together and hoping that when we teach to the middle, everybody gets it, right? We're talking phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics, specifically, explicitly. We also teach in a systematic way, where one skill builds on the next. And you might be like, well, yeah, duh. But the word systematic is a good word. So if you see explicit systematic in an answer choice, you want to zero in on it. Another thing for like this one that's heavy on the childhood development, it's going to be like self-efficacy, teaching students how to connect stories to themselves, giving students choice and autonomy, conflict resolution, these little things that you know as a teacher, obviously you're doing this every day, but the way they talk about it on the test, we want to zero in on that stuff. In fact, I have pulled all of the good words that I see in the test specs, because I study the test specs before I build it, and I put them in my book. So let me just show you. In every one of my books, I have, as you can see, good words list. This is for 5025. Let me zoom in. And you can see I've got everything from accommodations all the way to cultural responsiveness here, data-driven decisions. This is a big one, developmentally appropriate instruction or developmentally appropriate practices. That is in the specs. You want to be on the lookout for words like that. Differentiated instruction, all of this stuff, scaffolding, interventions, metacognition, modeling, good one, modeling, modifications. These are all things you want to be looking for in the answer choices. And then I have a whole thing, bad words and phrases and practices that you want to stay away from. Things that you might think like, well, that makes sense. I would do that in my classroom. You want to think of this as like a perfect scenario situation. We're not calling parents when kids are bad, even though we do. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying this is like you're a perfect teacher in a perfect scenario, and your students are perfect, and you have all the resources and the money and the support, right? So that's how I want you to think. So I'm going to show you how to do this when we're zeroing in on good words and bad words. Now, we're going to be taking some questions from the free study guides. I sort of took the ones that overlap each other because I can't go through every single question here, but I want you to definitely check this out. And for my 5025 people, it's got all these different things about the different pedagogies and practices that you are working on here. Okay. All right. So let's go to, and let me just zoom out slightly. Let's go to some of these practice test questions. And I'm going to just move this up. This is from both childhood development, and this is going to be language arts writing. This is going to cover both of those. This is going to be the 5024 and the 5025. But I'm just going to move this up so you can see past my face right there. Okay, so this is one where a lot of people might start reading here. And then you read all the way down, and then you read the answer choices, and then all the answer choices look good. And then you're like, oh man. And then you have to read this again. Okay. I say start here in the answer choices and cross off any bad words and zero in on any good words. Okay. A, assign Liam extra homework. Nope. Homework, always a bad word on this exam. Now, if you are someone who's like, well, homework, I assign homework. Yes, of course, we assign homework. On this test, it's not the right answer because typically they're putting homework with someone who's struggling, and extra homework is not going to help. Homework for sure. I believe in homework, extra practice, all of that. I don't believe in too much homework, but if it's intentional, yes. But on this exam, no. So as soon as you see it, cross it off, unless you're looking for a non-answer. You know how it says all of the following would work except, or which one is not, then it could be the right answer, but we're not looking for that here. B, incorporating activities such as Play-Doh, manipulations, and beading into daily classroom activities. Okay, this is hands-on. These are kids. Hands-on is good. Like it. Pair Liam with a peer who excels in fine motor tasks and ask them to complete the assignments. Okay, a lot of people like pairing kids up because cooperative learning is something that you guys all are told to do constantly, right? And I know some of you probably already know the answer to this question right now, but I'm going through each answer choice because I want you to see some of the patterns. So I know some of you already know the answer, and that's fine, but I want you to understand more than just the right answer, why it is and where these patterns are in the exam. They will often throw in, oh, put them with a peer. That's cool. You know, like they're going to work together. Here's where cooperative learning and peer-to-peer engagement is not the right answer. If students are struggling, you don't put it on another student to help that student with their fine motor tasks or fine motor skills. Now, in the real world, sure we would. We would say, hey, you know, Jose, you're so good at this. Can you guys work together for a second while I go and help so-and-so over here? We do that all the time. You give Jose a feeling of like leadership. The other student likes Jose. They're friends. Hey, can you help him with this just for a second? I'll be right back. I got to go help so-and-so. We do that all the time. But in this case, we don't want to rely on students to be intervening for us as teachers because it's really our job. So be wary or leery of anything that's peer-to-peer or cooperative learning unless we're trying to engage students. If students are struggling, typically that's not the answer. They need one-to-one with a teacher. And then D, reduce the number of fine motor activities to avoid frustration. Okay, reducing typically is not the right answer because it says you're sort of reducing the standard or making it easier. Now, there are times where we would reduce the level. If the reading level is too high, we might go down a level and things like that. But we want to sort of keep the standard high while scaffolding and helping the student meet the standard, okay? So right now, I don't like C, I don't like A, B and D could be it. I like B the best. Let's read the question. And then I continue to work backwards. I even read this first. Which of the following strategies would be most effective for Ms. Riviera to use to help Liam improve his fine motor skills? What are fine motor skills? Those are your fingers, right? Gross motor skills are big limbs, jumping, reaching, moving your torso. Fine motor skills, tying your shoelaces, writing, erasing, right? So if we're looking for fine motor skills, Play-Doh, using your hands and beading looks good. And I didn't even have to read the whole thing. This happens a lot where you have a big, long scenario and all you have to do is look at the answer choices, zero in on the one that looks best, take out all the bad answer choices with the bad practices, read the question stem, and you've gotten it. I've done a lot of practice tests where I don't even read the question. I just look at the answer choices and I can get like a B on the exam practice test. So I don't recommend you do that. I'm just saying it does work. And do this in practice. Don't just adopt this on test day. Like do this with your study guides and your practice tests. Let's just read the top just to make sure. Ms. Riviera notices that one of her students, Liam, struggles with fine motor skills and often avoids activities that require using scissors or writing. She wants to support the development in this area. Okay, scissors and writing may be like, ugh, the kid's like, I'm not good at that. But Play-Doh and beading might be more fun for the students. So that's why, again, B is a better answer. And again, we did that by working words. And you might say, well, that's obvious. It is to you. But, a lot of people might like C or D, because you're not a teacher yet. You don't understand that those are bad practices when it comes to students who are struggling. So just be on the lookout for stuff like that. Okay, now, with A, I have summative assessment, norm reference assessment, formative assessment, and portfolio assessment. This goes along with 5024 and 5025 because both will assess your ability to use data to make instructional decisions. That's one of the biggest jobs you can have. I'm going to go over all 4 of these types of assessments. I do have them all talked about in these books. And I also have tables where they're all listed with examples to help you. So if you're looking for more in that area, I have that here. Also the online course, which I'll show you later, and you'll get an offer code for that. But I'll show you that later, I go into it. But let's just talk about these right here. So which type of assessment would best suit Mrs. Lopez's goal? All right. Ms. Lopez notices that some kindergarten students struggle to recognize letter sounds. She decides to use an assessment method that will help her monitor their progress daily and adjust her teaching. Okay. When you are monitoring progress, you are using a formative assessment. Think of formative assessment as informing your instruction. So, formative assessments are anything like walking around the room and observing students. And when you see a student struggling, intervening and saying, let me help you with this. How would you say this word or blah, blah, blah? You might be walking around the room with your notebook and writing anecdotal notes about group work that's happening. You might do a quick thumbs up, thumbs down in terms of having your kids understand what's going on. It could also be exit slips at the end of your lesson. Maybe you do a quick 3, 2, 1 exit slip and you collect the exit slips and have a look and see where students are confused. And then tomorrow you go over that, right? It can be so many things. It could be looking at daily classwork, but it's happening daily in an informal manner. Typically, formative assessments are informal, although a lot of districts have turned summative assessments and they call them formatives and they're not, but that's another thing. Formatives are informal, quick checks. Teachers are using it constantly. You're totally using it all the time. This is something that we're going to use constantly as teachers, okay? Now, let's go up here and talk about summative assessments. Summative assessments happen at the end. Think sum or total or end. Happens at the end of learning. So, for example, if you have gone through a whole chapter or a unit, right? And the whole time you've been formatively assessing along the way. Oops. You know what? This thing is killing me. Hang on. Give me 1 second, you guys. Sorry. Sorry about that. There we go. Every once in a while, my screen will turn off and I'm not sure why, but we're live, so we have to just go with it. Sorry. Let me go back. Here we are. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So summative is going to be the end of learning. So you've done a chapter, you've done a whole chapter, you've done a unit, whatever, right? And you formatively assessed along the way. You have checked, you've intervened, you've given students the support they need. And then at the end, you give like a chapter test. Summative assessment is also like a midterm, a final, an end of the school year test, okay? Summative assessments. Now, norm referenced is student to student comparison. I'm going to put compare. If they give you like a percentage, you're in the 95th percentile, you're in the 25th percentile, that means compared to everyone else who took the exam, you're at this level. That's norm referenced. Portfolio is when you take a bunch of different artifacts, like a bunch of math problems, or maybe you do a bunch of writing assignments. Maybe it's reading scores or all of that put into a folder. Those can be portfolios. It's typically about a group or a type of skills, and you're collecting lots of artifacts for that. And then I'll just add one more to this: criterion referenced. Those are your state standardized assessments. Those are also considered summative because they happen at the end of the year. Criterion means that it is aligned to a set of standards. So like in the state of Florida where I live, we have the Florida Standards Assessment. That's an assessment at the end of the year for third, fourth, fifth, all the way up to high school, where they are tested on the Florida standards. And ideally, if you teach to the standards, your students will do just fine. That's ideally what would happen. But we all know that there's a lot more going on in education than just that. But that's why we have the criterion assessments, usually state assessments, but they are also considered summative because they happen at the end of learning. At the end of the year, you take that test, okay? Now, these are all tests. They could all be multiple choice except for portfolio. Portfolio is like, you have a folder full of stuff, right? But formative assessments could be a quick multiple choice quiz. Norm reference assessments are multiple choice. Summative can be multiple choice. Summative could also be an essay test that you take at the end. Formative assessments could be essay. Norm reference could be essay. It's not really what's on the test. It's sort of when it's given and the data is used for what. The data in a formative assessment is used to inform your instruction so you can progress monitor and make decisions about where you need to go with the kids. All right. Summative assessment, that's at the end. That's to measure outcomes. Did what I, implement work? Norm reference is to compare student to student performance. Portfolio is to see growth over time. Oh, this is what your writing looked like in August. Now look, we're in December. Look at what you've done so far. Look how you've grown, right? And criterion also is to measure outcomes. Is norm reference a teacher made, or would it be these computer programs that help us progress monitor? It's a lot of them. It would be very difficult for a teacher to make a norm referenced assessment. I mean, unless you're just comparing student performance. Norm reference are typically state assessments. The AP assessments are norm referenced. They're graded on a bell curve, right? And this is the norm. And if you're over here, you're in really good shape. If you're down here, you're in not so good shape. They actually set the cut scores based on that. So norm reference is not necessarily teacher made. It's about a percentage. You're in the 10th or the 90th percentile, the 80th percentile, the 75th percentile, or student to student comparison. Sometimes it's state to state comparison. Okay. So typically like the Northeast, those schools are in the top 95th percentile, whereas other states are not. They're in the bottom. So those are norm referenced assessments. Okay. All right. Let's look at the next one. This is very short here. So let's go ahead and just read the question. If you have a really short question here, you don't have to really work backwards. Phonemic awareness includes the ability to, and this is going to be on both exams, form compound words and combine word parts, spell accurately and decode unfamiliar words, pronounce individual sounds in words, differentiate between homonyms, and spell them correctly. Okay, here's something you need to know for this test. Phonemic and phonological awareness are all about sounds only. We are not concerned with looking at the words. We are using our listening and speaking skills only. We're not even spelling the words for the students. I may say something like, how many sounds in the word bat? And the student would go, b-a-t, 3 sounds. You didn't have to see the word to do that. You're just listening to it. And that's why C is the correct answer. And a bunch of you are saying that. Very good. Here's something to understand. Decoding, spelling, this is all about phonics. In phonics, you have to look at the word. For example, If I see a P and an H together, that makes a F sound. But I have to know the code in order to do that. And phonemic awareness, you do not have to see it. You're just listening. If I said, how many sounds in the word phonics, you would go, f, n, I, k, s. 6 sounds, right? I don't know that it's a P and an H in there. I just know f is a sound. F, n, I, k, s. Now, compound words and combining word parts, this could be sounds only, but it's bigger chunks of words. So that could be phonological awareness. Now, phonological awareness is a lot like phonemic awareness, that it sounds only, but phonological awareness are bigger parts of words. For example, if I said, say the word bat, and you say bat, and I say, break up the word bat by its onset and rhyme, you would go b-at. You're not breaking it up b-at. You're saying b-at. 2 sounds. Onset, the consonant, the opening consonant or consonant cluster, in this case, b. And the rhyme, R-I-M-E, at, which is the vowel and the closing consonant sound. So that's all covered in here. It's a lot. Phonics, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, fluency. These are all the foundational skills of reading. They are so important. They are so nuanced. They're a big part of this exam because you are, at first and foremost, a reading teacher. So I highly recommend you really get down into the nitty gritty with these particular skills, because you're going to have questions like this where it's like, oh, well, what is phonemic awareness exactly? And you might be like, oh, spelling. Yeah. Oh, sounds, decoding. I don't, but if you look at this stuff, decoding goes with phonics because there are codes in words. When you see them, you then sound them out. Letter sound correspondence, right? Spelling goes with phonics right away. B and D are out. Okay. And then you have A. Well, compound words are bigger chunks of words. Even if we only do the sounds only, that's phonological awareness. This could also be morphology, which is a part of phonics. So there's all these nuances. You've got to really familiarize yourself with this stuff. And that's why I say, please read the study guide. Don't just do practice tests, because when you do the practice test, you don't really understand the nuances that are going on here. Okay. Samantha, what is the difference between the digital study guide online course and the physical book? Okay, really quickly. Thank you for asking. Physical books you buy on Amazon. Digital copy is sent to you from our website. It's identical to this. It's just in a PDF format. It looks like this. Hang on. Let me go here. One. Okay. And it's hot, meaning you can click these links here and it'll take you to exactly where you need to go. But it's the exact same book as the physical. Okay. It's just that it is digital. Some people prefer digital. Now, the offer code that you're getting today only works on our website. So if you want the physical book, we can't give discounts on Amazon. So physical, but if you really want the physical, don't buy the digital and print it. Just buy the physical. It's a lot cheaper than wasting all your ink. And then the online course, you get our digital study guide, the full thing, and you get all the videos that come with it. So I have tons of videos, hours of videos going through this. So if you like what's happening here, you'll like the online course. All right, let's get back to this. Thank you for asking. All right, let's talk about math. So you're going to have a lot of questions like this on the 5025. There's some really nuanced math questions. But this will fall under the pedagogy in 5024. They have like a bunch of different skills, and some of that is math. So let's have a look here. I have them in my answer choices: transitivity, patterns, subitizing, and decomposition. And I have this die here, okay? And I know, because I studied the book, that when I'm looking at number patterns, right away, I could probably point out that it's subitizing. This is why working backward is key, because you can kind of see what's going on here and zero in. Now, I would still read the question, but you can see what's going on here, okay? A teacher is using dice to help students recognize numbers. She rolls one die and the student immediately says 3. What skills the teacher working on? This is subitizing. When students can see like a group of dots and say 6 or 3 or 2, That's subitizing, and it's part of math. It's part of like understanding groups of things. Now, if you have 25 different things all smushed together, the students aren't going to be able to differentiate that. A lot of adults wouldn't either. But when we start using base 10 blocks and things like that, and they see a row of 10 or a row of 5, they can quickly identify it, which makes adding and subtracting or take away versus add to a lot easier. So that's why we work on subitizing here. Transitivity is like this. If A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A is greater than C, right? Because A is greater than B and B is greater than C. You're sort of transferring the meaning of one thing to the other. Patterns are important for the little guys, and it might be something like this. I'm trying to draw a cute heart there. Triangle, heart. And you might say, what's the next? Oops, let's fill it in because it's got to be a pattern. What's the next shape? And they would be like triangle. And then it might be harder. It might be triangle, heart, square, triangle, heart, square. And then you say, what's the next? And it says square. Patterns are very important in math. Patterns are important everywhere, right? And then decomposition is when you take a number like 345 and you say, okay, that's 345. And that is, oops, you can't see the 5. 5, we'll put it over here. That's how you decompose a number. Now, I will say that the math that they're learning now is a lot different. They use a lot of Common Core math, and people say, oh, it's ridiculous. It's actually not. They really understand these numbers. These kids really understand these numbers in a way that we were not taught. We were taught to line them up, subtract them, carry the 1, blah, blah, blah. They learn a lot more now about regrouping and number manipulation. My husband's a math teacher, and I was teaching my daughter the shortcuts when she was little. I was like, just line them up and like subtract them here, and he was like, don't show her that. They're using Common Core math now, which he argues is actually better because it really teaches them how to break down the numbers. So anyways, I love a shortcut, but he got on me when I was teaching. So he does the math homework now. I don't. But so that's you're going to see a lot of that here, and you may not have been exposed to any of this. You may not have even known when you were a kid that this is called subitizing. You just learned to memorize the 3 dots versus the 2 dots versus the 5 dots and all of that. So just try to get to know this, especially in the book. Okay. All right. Let's talk about number 7. Okay, we've got diligence and perseverance, skepticism and cynicism, interest and happiness, curiosity and inquiry. These are good words. Curiosity and inquiry are good words for best, especially the science. What do we want students to be? Curious. We want them to go, why does that happen? We want them to ask questions. Very, very important. So which of the following is most important in early childhood? Science classroom, 100% of the time, curiosity and inquiry. Always go with that one. Now, diligence and perseverance, you might say, well, that's important. Yeah, it is. But curiosity and inquiry is more important, okay? Because we want students to ask questions about the word. Skepticism, that is one for the science classroom. We always want to be skeptical. We want to run the tests again and again. But cynicism, they got their whole lives to be cynics. We don't need to teach them that at a young age. Interest and happiness, you might say, well, I want that too. Yeah, happiness, interest, okay, but curiosity and inquiry is better. So D all the way. And if you see those words in an answer choice, zero in, it's probably the correct answer. All right, let's go with number 9 here. Self-pacing, self-esteem, self-actualization. Good word here, self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a skill that we want students to develop at this age, okay? Self-efficacy is sort of understanding that's important to be contributing to the classroom environment, that we pick up after ourselves, that we share, that we resolve conflicts. It doesn't mean we allow people to walk all over us and that we cower, but it also means that we understand we're sort of living in a society where we have to follow a social contract and, share our toys and pick up after ourselves and things like that. Help somebody who's having trouble. And so self-efficacy is a good word on this exam. Now, self-esteem and self-actualization are part of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we go over that a lot in the book. Self-actualization is at the top of that hierarchy, which is where we all want to be. And I would argue even as adults, we don't have self-actualization. Self-esteem is in there as well. That's when, we can help students with their self-esteem when we stand by our doors in the morning and the kids come in and we say, hey, Jessica, thank you so much for coming today. I'm excited you're here. Just these little things that help students feel good about themselves, and then they're more apt to take risks. Students with high self-esteem don't care if they get something wrong. They'll try anyway. That's really important to build in our classroom. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and read this last part. They understand that when they work together to learn and clean up, they will have a positive experience in the classroom. This is definitely self-efficacy. Okay. You might say, well, it's self-esteem too. Yeah, it is, but it's about working together and learning to clean up. You will have a positive experience. Self-esteem is about positive experience, but self-efficacy is when we're understanding sort of the social dynamics of the classroom. Really important to teach students at this age. Because, when you're a kid and as an adult, you're worried about yourself. They don't have empathy yet. You're like trying to tell them, hey, how would you feel? I love it when people do this with kids. How would you feel if somebody took your toys? And the kid's like, I don't know. I don't care. It's not me we're talking about. They don't get that empathy. They don't get the empathy until later, till they're like teenagers. Some kids have it. Some kids are very they bring on other people's feelings, but most kids are out for themselves because it's like survival. That's where they're at. So we have to sort of instill this in them. Some kids get it. Some kids don't. Some adults get it. Some adults don't. It's sort of just the way it is. Kylie, I seem to narrow it down to two choices and the end. How can I fix that to get to the one answer? Well, one thing you can do is definitely read the study guides cover to cover. You definitely want to dig in. Here's another thing you can do. When you are practicing, so let's say you're using my practice test, and I have very detailed answer explanations that will address these other four things. But let's say you're taking a practice test on ETS or in their study companion, because there's a practice test in the study companion. And you see, right, you have self-pacing, self-esteem, self-actualization, and self-efficacy. Let's say you got it right. Okay, great. It's self-efficacy. I would recommend looking these up also, because if it's in the answer choices, it's going to be on the test as well. Maybe worded differently. For example, you might have one that is about self-esteem or self-actualization. So when you're practicing, if you have a item like this where you have words like, even if it's like phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, make sure you know what all of those are. If you have something like this, make sure you know what self-esteem is, self-actualization. Make sure you understand Maslow's. Make sure you know the difference between them. Don't just grab that right answer and move on in your self-study. We want to make sure that we understand why it's correct and why it's incorrect. Read those answer explanations that I have in here. Every book that I do, in fact, this one is relatively new. Let me pull it up. Okay, let me show you really quickly. This is how you do it. Practice question, practice test one. Okay, answer. So here's the practice test. And I have little mini practice tests at the end of each section. Let's see, where are we? Come on. Okay, let me zoom in. Oops, that's zooming in on the pages. Let me zoom in on the actual. Okay, do you see how I have correct answer A? And then I say why the other ones are incorrect. This is not, I do provide it in the green book. This is an older book. Lots of people are passing with this book, so I haven't changed it because I don't want to change the whole structure of it. I go into the answer explanations and say why the others are incorrect. But as I've moved on to newer books, I actually explicitly say, incorrect answer B. Why? Because of this. I make it very explicit. Read the answer explanations. This is like a whole other chapter of look at how long these things are. Make sure you understand why something is incorrect. Knowing why it's incorrect is just as powerful as knowing why it's correct. So even if you're using my book or not, let's say you're using the ETS and there are 3 other answer choices, don't just click on, have ChatGPT open, have Google open and drop those in there and say, what's the difference between this and this? Dig down into those multiple choice questions. People do the surface level studying. And they go, oh, I got all the practice test questions right, but you have no idea why you got something right and why you got something wrong. Dig into the item. Think like a test maker. What are they doing here? Self-efficacy. Hang on. Self-efficacy looks a lot like or feels a lot like self-esteem and self-actualization. What's the difference between the three? Get in there and get your hands dirty and understand why one is correct and why the others are not, even if it's a small nuance, because that's going to mean all the difference on test day. Marie, do you have example of constructed response? Yes, we're about to do that. In fact, that's our next slide, Marie. Thank you for the segue. Okay. So now we're done with the multiple choice. Let's go into the constructed response. Now, 5025, you do not have a constructed response. However, please stay on the line, because we're going to go over some things that are going to help you with your multiple choice. This is all the critical thinking part. And for the 5024 people, you are going to apply everything we talked about and learned about in our book and read about. Now you're going to take all that information and you're going to answer questions on the exam. Tawana, I have the 5025. Do I need to buy the 5024 too? No, just go with the 5025. If you're taking the 5025, just buy the book that you need. These are modeled after the test specifications. They are written specifically for the exam. Now, if you want an extra test, if you want more information, you can do that. But I would just buy the book that's for your test. And then use my YouTube channel and my free webinars and stuff like that. Oh, and if you want, get the online course. Okay. I talked about the difference between the 5025 and the 5024 at the beginning, but the 5025 is more about content, science, social studies, math, language arts. This one is more about child development. You really need to figure out which test you have to take, and you do that through your state. Don't go just buying up a bunch of stuff and hoping for the best. Figure out what test you need. Okay. All right. So let's go into the constructed response. So you could have a constructed response that has a set of data, might be a table full of student assessment data, maybe reading data, maybe behavior data. It doesn't matter, because you are going to be able to grab onto some strategies that you can use for anything. First of all, when it comes to phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and phonics, pull out a couple of strategies that you can use, right? First of all, modeling is a great strategy for any situation. Modeling good behavior, modeling how to raise your hand, modeling transitions in the classroom, modeling self-awareness, modeling how to share your toys, modeling how to line up after the playground, okay? Modeling good fluency, modeling phonemic awareness, all of that is good. Another great strategy, explicit instruction, where you're standing in the front of the room, and explicit instruction includes modeling, okay? And so all of that helps. Get some from the books, grab a few strategies. Like for fluency, I love repeated reading. For metacognition, I love read aloud, think aloud. These are things I've read about a lot. And so I apply them all the time here. Okay. Also, visuals help young students. Explicit instruction with lists, checklists where they can check off when they do something right. All of these things. Practice procedures and routines. This goes for adults too. I don't know if you've been to a faculty meeting or a professional development with your peers, but if there are not explicit instructions for the adults, and I don't say this sarcastically, I say this as someone who taught professional development for a huge portion of my career. Without explicit instruction, the adults do not know what to do and will get frustrated and start talking to one another. So right away, we have a step. All right, guys, we're going to start off the professional development today. We're going to make sure we sign in. Has everybody signed in? I want to make sure you get your professional development points. All right, great. Thumbs up. Everybody sign in. Yes. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over this email from the district. I've got to break it down for you. We're going to do that 5 minutes, and I'm going through the instructions of the professional development. Guess who loves that? Everyone. Everyone loves explicit instruction. Everyone loves practice routines and procedures. No one likes chaos. Not in the classroom, not at work, not in the lunchroom, nowhere. Kids love structure. So you can use routines and procedures. And you can be explicit and model and practice. All of that can be used in your constructed response. All right. So let's have a look at what's going on here. Task. You're going to work backwards again. A lot of you want to start here. You want to get wrapped up in the scenario? No. We're going here first. What am I being asked to do? Analyze the situation and identify specific needs Emma has. So you're going to read the scenario. I made this one relatively short here because I wanted it to fit on a slide, and I want it to be easy enough that you guys understand. It doesn't matter if there's data attached to this. I can find a need very quickly. Okay. So Emma's struggling with something. Let's figure it out. Propose 2 research-based strategies that would implement to help Emma transition between activities more smoothly. Notice that in my particular task, it gave away what Emma's having a problem with: transitions. Transitioning from language arts to math, or maybe specials to the playground or whatever. Okay. So right away, I know Emma having a hard time with class. Like, you need to implement some of your classroom management techniques. Practice routines and procedures, perhaps some visuals for her to look at. Also, maybe a checklist. 2 research-based strategies. Easy peasy. Come up with 2 in your head right away. Transitions. Okay. Practice routines and procedures. I'd probably use some visual cues, some cues. Okay. Think about it. Write them down. And then justify. You're always going to have this: why these strategies are effective. All right. Why they're effective. All you have to do is say, these will help Emma because. All right. And I'm going to make this 3 paragraphs. I'm going to make the first one Emma's need. I'm going to talk about it in the first paragraph. The second paragraph, I'm going to do a research-based strategy and justification. And the third paragraph is going to be my second research-based strategy and its justification. And I'm going to keep it real simple. You could make this all 1 paragraph and still do it, but I recommend breaking it up with paragraphs. I even use headings to make it easy on the grader. Make it easy on the grader. All right, let's read this really quickly. Ms. Jones, a pre-K teacher, and one of her students, Emma, Ms. Jones is a pre-K teacher, and one of her students, Emma, has difficulty transitioning between activity. During free play, Emma often refuses to stop what she is doing and becomes upset when it's time to move to the next scheduled activity. This behavior is causing her to miss important learning opportunities, and it disrupts the rest of the class. All right, here's the thing. Many of you know this, but some kids, when they don't want to transition, they're being defiant and they're being, quote, bad. But a lot of times it's because they don't want to stop, and transitioning to another activity makes them overwhelmed. And if Emma here is always doing this, like, she's pretty well behaved every other time, but when it comes to moving on to the next activity, she's getting lippy with you and doesn't want to do it. Something's going on in these transitions. We need to practice our transitions. We need to help Emma feel more comfortable. Maybe we count Emma down. All right, Emma, guys, we're going to be, changing up here in about 2 minutes. So I want you all to get ready to change to math in about 2 minutes. So start wrapping up. Or maybe you count her down from 5 minutes. Maybe you give her a little more time. Then you count down again at 3, then again at 2, so that it's not just an abrupt change. There's lots of things we can do here. We can practice our procedures and routines, and maybe give Emma a job. Maybe Emma needs to feel useful. And so you say, Emma, hey, I really need help during these transitions. Do you think when it's time to transition from language arts to reading, you can help me collect the pencils or whatever? And then you practice that with Emma, and now she's useful. Perhaps Emma needs a visual. That there's like a checklist with some visual cues. A lot of times students with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, they need visual cues. Okay. Taylor says a timer. Yes, on the board. You know who else loves a timer? Adults. I used to use it in professional development. All right, guys, we got 2 more minutes. And then they know, like, we're about to move on to the next activity. No surprises. Transition songs. Yes, that's great. They do that in the halls of high school. They start playing music when it's time to get moving to class, right? We tell our kids to do your last fun thing. Yep. You got 2 minutes to do your last fun thing. Very good, Bree. Yes. So you guys all have this. Now what we need to do is kind of put it together. So we're going to identify a need. And now in real life, this might be 2 paragraphs. It might be some behavior data. It doesn't matter. Don't make it complicated. They're saying Emma has a problem transitioning. All right. Now we need 2 research-based strategies. I'm going to use probably practice procedures and routines with a little bit of modeling and probably some visual cues or countdowns. Okay. And then justify. All right. So this is how I would set it up. All right. I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'll just move it when it's time. When it's time to do that third paragraph, I'll move it up for you guys. Okay. So here is what I would do. And you can use headings. You can use headings if you want. And I apologize for all the writing on the screen, but I just want to get this to you. And those of you who have signed up for the actual webinar, you're going to get this in an email. So you'll be able to look this over. Okay. So it said the first thing, what was the first bullet here? Identify a need, or it's basically a weakness, but we say a need because it's strengths-based language. Emma is struggling with transitioning between activities, which is a common challenge for young children who may have difficulty with routine changes. Notice I implemented that. That shows my content knowledge. Routine changes gives people agita. They get worked up over it. Or are highly focused on their current task. Her difficulty in transitioning suggests a need for support in developing self-regulation and flexibility in daily routines. All that's in the book. All that is part of the developmentally appropriate teaching strategies, okay? So just a couple sentences there. Now I'm going to go into proposed strategy. So task number 1, check. I identified a need, okay? Now here we go. One effective strategy to help Emma is implementing a visual schedule in the classroom. Visual schedules give children clear, pictorial representation of daily routine, helping them anticipate transition. For example, using images or symbols that represent free play, circle time, snack time, and other activities, Emma can visually see what comes next. Here's my justification. This is the third bullet. Research has shown, just throw that in there. Research shows, you can put that in there. You don't have to cite the research, just say research shows that visual schedules are beneficial for young children, especially those who experience anxiety or resistance to transition. They create a predictable environment which reduces stress and improves behavior during transitions. All right, let me talk about the formula I just used. In the first sentence, right here, I said the strategy right away. I didn't go, well, the teacher can use a variety of things, blah, blah, blah. No. One effective strategy to help Emma is a visual schedule. Boom, name it, be direct, say it right away. Then I define it. So first sentence, say it. Show it. Second sentence, define it. Show the reader what it is. Visual schedules give students clear pictorial representation. Then the third sentence, I get more specific. For example, this cues up, hey, I'm about to tell you a specific detail about this. That shows the grader, the person giving you the points, that you're getting specific. It's part of the rubric. You have to be specific. Otherwise, you lose points. If you just go on and on about a pictorial schedule, oh, students like it. Oh, they feel comfortable. Okay, show me how you would use it here. So using images or symbols that represent free play, circle time, snack time, and other activities, Emma can visually see what comes next. I'm applying it specifically to this particular situation. Okay? And then the last part is why it works, the justification, or what we call the rationale for the strategy. Research shows that visual schedules, blah, blah, blah. So if you want to get formulaic, if you're one of those who likes a formula, here's what you do. Name the strategy, define the strategy, give an example of it specific for this scenario, and then give the rationale. Why does it work? Research shows it helps reduce anxiety. Okay, let's do it again with this one. Let me move it up. Okay, so you can see it. All right, here we go. First sentence of this paragraph. A second strategy involves providing verbal and nonverbal transition cues or warnings. For instance, now this one, I sort of didn't have to define what a verbal, or because it says it there, like, you know, verbal and nonverbal transition cues kind of says it all. But notice I say, for instance, getting specific, giving Emma a 5-minute warning right there. It's specific to Emma. Before ending playtime can prepare her for the upcoming shift. Somebody else said this. Transition songs, chimes, or hand signals can also act as consistent cues that signal the need to transition. Very good. And now the rationale. Transition warnings give her time to finish her work, mentally shift for the next activity, and feel more in control. This helps develop self-regulation. You could also say, research shows verbal and nonverbal transition cues help develop self-regulation. All of this can be done relatively quickly. Now, you could also do this in one paragraph or two paragraphs. You could figure out a way, but I like the 3 paragraph because what it does, it gives the grader like a checklist. Notice, boom, check. We found a need. Boom, check. There's 2 strategies. The next 2 paragraphs are the 2 strategies. And boom, check. They gave a rationale for both. All of it works. Check, check, check. You're getting a good score. You're passing the test. All right. So, and I would recommend that for all of your constructed responses. You might not have one for the 5025 if you guys are taking that, but if you're taking the PLT 5621, you'll have a constructed response. And I'm having that webinar in a couple of weeks. I'm going to show you when I'm having all these other webinars. But all right, so that's the constructed response. Now, you might get one for, let's just say, a conflict resolution. You might have 2 kids fighting. You might have one kid who can't sit still during reading time. There are all these different things you can choose from. But my advice to you is when you're reading through the study guide, you don't have one. You don't have a writing task here, but especially if you're doing the 5024, read through here and grab a couple of things that you like. Like if you're like, oh yeah, I use that in my classroom, tab it because you can apply that to literally any scenario. Modeling, visual cues, countdown timers, all that can be used for behavior, cleanup, transitioning. It can be used for a lot of different things. So get to know the strategies, the good words, and all of that in the book. Okay, I'm going to take some questions now, and I'm going to show you where I can't move my mouse down. There I am. Am I over here? There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me show you where to get some of our resources. And if you want, you can ask me some questions in the chat, and I'll go back and forth. So first of all, if you are interested in the books, you can go to KathleenJasper.com under study guides, early childhood, and I have them both here. Now, notice that on this page, we have the digital download. When you buy from us, you get a digital copy, the one I showed you like on the PDF, the one I showed you on my screen, okay? It's emailed to you immediately. Please use the email address you used to buy. Some of you have old email addresses saved in your shop, and it's like an iCloud, and then we try to email you and we can't get you. Please check the email address you used to sign up. We get a lot of people, I can't access my stuff. It's because you use some crazy email that you no longer have access to. And you can always email us at info@KathleenJasper.com. We will immediately give you access. Do not worry. Okay, so you click here, you buy it, and you get the digital copy emailed to you immediately. Okay, if you want the physical copy, just click this Amazon link. It'll take you to Amazon. You can see we have lots of 5-star ratings. People love this book. They have used it to pass. Here's another thing. I know you can save a few bucks by going used here. It's going to have writing in it. We get emails saying, hey, I bought your book on Amazon, it had writing in it. Yeah, because you bought a used study guide. I can't help it. Buy it new. Okay. I know it's a few extra bucks, but you don't want a used study guide. It's not like it's a used book that somebody read. They wrote in it, most likely. Okay. So make sure you have a look at that. Okay. Then let's go here. We also have an online course. Share this tab instead. So an online course is going to be the 5025 here. This comes with the digital study guide. And it has lots and lots of videos and all of that. You'll be pulled into our LMS. It's self-paced. You can watch all the videos for all the different things, the math, the reading, all of it. It's all in there if you like to learn. You can also use it as an audio course, okay? So if you like this webinar, you'll love the online course. And again, that comes with everything, digital book and the online course. We also have other stuff. We're going to be doing some more free webinars. You can see here, I'm doing Praxis Core next weekend. I'm doing SLLA. This is for leadership. But I have the PLT. I just did this one. I'm probably doing it again. We've done ESOL. I'm doing special ed after the SLLA. In April, I have a whole slew coming on for that. I just did the foundations of reading. If you're struggling with any of the reading ones, this will help you. Check out all of our free webinars. We've got a lot. I also have how to lesson plan, interview process. All of that is going to help you. Okay. That I've got teacher interview and resume. I also have a book on Amazon, which is Teach a Survival Guide for New Teachers. A lot of people love this book and it makes me so happy because I have funny stories in here, but I also show you like how to lesson plan, how to do classroom management, different strategies I love, just kind of all the things and all of my failures falling on my face. It's sort of funny. Also, let's look at some free stuff really quickly. Let me show you my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet to YouTube, definitely do it. So much stuff here. I've got from Think Like a Test Maker strategies to teacher reading, all of the writing that I talk about. We did a lot of the writing today. But I have a whole writing playlist. I have more subject areas. This is where the webinars are. Good words, bad words, PLT, everything. I'm constantly uploading. Every week we do 1 to 2 videos on YouTube. So definitely subscribe there. And if you like short stuff, and I got some comments here. You'll love my TikTok channel. I love TikTok. I'm having so much fun teaching on TikTok. I do a lot of stuff. You can see I'm talking a lot about phonemic awareness and foundations of reading and things like that. If you love the shorter stuff, follow me on TikTok. I'm having a lot of fun there. Of course, we are on Facebook and Instagram and all of that as well. Let me see what we got here. Can I use a calculator for the math portion? I can't remember if you get a calculator. Let me check real quick. Got to spell calculator right. No calculators, not on the 5025. You shouldn't need one. I know I say that. You can use it on the 500 and the elementary ed. The elementary ed has really hard math. There's like slope intercept on the elementary ed. But the 5025, you shouldn't need it. It's all sort of regrouping, math facts, things like that. Okay. I had to check that. I'm in so many tests that I forget what's allowed. Like I'm just in the SAT. I've been in the SAT mind. They actually give you a graphing calculator. You can do all the questions on this calculator, but no, not on the 5025. Okay. For the 5025, they give you pencil and paper. Yes, you get some scratch paper. Sometimes it's like a dry erase. Other times it's actual paper. It just depends on the testing place. Is there a number of questions that you get correct and will you cut off when those are achieved? I know I said I had 180 minutes. Okay. You have to go through all of the questions on your test. It's not going to cut off when you've achieved it. There is no specific number that you're getting correct. Remember, this is a scaled score. So your raw score is converted into a scale score. What I recommend in practice is that you're getting at least a 75% correct on the multiple choice. That's putting you in the safe zone. But to be honest, in most states, you need like a D on this exam to pass it. You do not need an A. You need a D. And that helps people to understand that you do not need to score super high on these exams. A lot of times, some states it's an F. Some states it's like a high F. You just have to answer more than 50% correct. So if you are not achieving on this exam, you may want to look at some of your practices because if the cut scores are pretty low. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying on standardized state assessments, it's not like you need an A. You need a low C, high D. I just took the 5025 and didn't pass. My score is a 152 in my state and I need a 156 to pass. You're about one question away, Nakia, and it's okay. I would just get back in there and study. You've got 28 days till you can take it again. Try to remember what you got wrong and then Google it, chat GPT it, go into my study guide, have a look, really get to know the concepts and you'll do better. I know it's a bummer. It's probably one question away, 2 questions away, but it's okay. It happens. Some people, lots of people have to take it more than once. Is the unofficial score accurate or has it changed before? Okay. So for those of you without a writing task, so the 5025, you will get an unofficial score unless they're doing some revising of the test. And when I say revising of the test, I do not mean changing the test. I mean taking out old items and putting in new items. The test does not change until it gets a new number. It's the same test, same standards, everything, but they might change out the questions. That's not changing the test. If they're doing that sort of cleaning up of bad items or items that aren't performing very well, you will not get an unofficial score. Don't worry, you'll get it in an email. If you do get an unofficial score, and that means you only have a multiple choice test, those of you with writing, they won't give it to you because they have to factor in your writing score and they have to grade that. The unofficial score almost always is the official, unless they have to adjust the test for any reason. But if you pass on your unofficial, 99% of the time you have passed the exam. Now, it's not to say that if you are really close, like let's say your state is a 156 to pass and you got a 156, if they go in and adjust the exam and the scale score, you could be on the losing end of that. But for the most part, the unofficial matches the official. I'm just saying unofficial is still unofficial. I scored a 156 and needed a 161. How many questions did I miss? I don't know. Here's the thing, guys. These are scaled scores. Some of the more complicated questions are worth more. So the ones that say choose all that apply, those are worth more than other questions. I have no idea. The best thing that you can do is to prepare yourself for the different types of questions you will have by reading and understanding the concepts on the exam. Trying to narrow down exactly how many questions you need correct is an exercise in futility because it's a scale score. You do not know. And the scoring practices are under lock and key because that's the way the testing industry works. But typically, if you're taking the 5025, a 156 means that you scored typically 56% correct or a little less. So you're at the F range. You need to be in the D range. A 161 is a low D. So you answered 56% correct. You need to have 61% correct. But like I said before, they are all scaled scores. Some questions are worth more than others. That's how it works. Do you recommend study.com? No, I don't. I recommend my products. Lenka, I have an online course that people like more than study.com, but if you want a bigger company, it's not going to be super specific. But no, I don't recommend study.com. I recommend KathleenJasper.com. But some people like study.com. It just depends on what you want to do. Theirs is a membership based. It runs out. If you buy my stuff, you have it until you don't want it anymore. We don't take it away from you. So, but more practice tests, I would probably go to ETS for more practice tests, that kind of thing. Okay. So that is the end of this. If you have any remaining questions, go ahead and throw them in, so I can just answer up. You guys have been awesome today. All of this is a lot, especially if you're a brand new teacher. I know becoming a teacher and doing all this stuff is really hard to do. Just take it one bite at a time. It will happen. I promise you. Don't give up. Keep trying. And I know it's a bummer. You paid for the test and now you're paying for our program and all this stuff. Remember, this experience is going to make you a better teacher. Students are held back in third grade if they don't pass an exam. Even if they have straight A's in high school, if they don't pass an exam in Florida, they don't graduate. So just know this is kind of the industry we're in. So we need to just have a lot of empathy for ourselves. Like go easy on yourself. Treat yourself like you would treat your students. If your students had a hard time with an exam, would you be like, oh, you're an idiot. I can't believe you can't pass this. No, you would never say that to your kids. Don't say that to yourself. We are so mean to ourselves. Treat yourself like you would treat your student. And be kind to yourself, because I know you all are kind to your students. So maybe just give yourself a little bit of that empathy and that'll work. Will this help me with the GACE 001 early elementary? Yes, it will. Yes, it will. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being early elementary teachers. I think the world of you. And if you need anything, email us at info@KathleenJasper.com. It will be our pleasure to help. And I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar next weekend, Praxis